Thank you for being here today. Today is the Development Review Board meeting, and I show that we are Thursday, January 18th. Got my notes here. I will read the admonishment. I want to thank Carissa to my right, your left, who's calling roll today and taking minutes. Jack's our assistant. Up above in the AV box, we've got Caitlin and Jason, who are going to be presenting, providing presentations and making sure everything runs smooth from an AV standpoint. Obviously, we thank everybody here who's in person, and we always appreciate those who are not here watching us remotely, streaming, and watching this on recording on a later time. So now I will go into the admonishment. Purpose of this board is to maintain the quality of development in Scottsdale by reviewing all design aspects of proposed developments and the relationship of those components to the surrounding environment and community. Board also reviews all preliminary plats for subdivisions to assure conformance to policies and ordinance requirements. This agenda will consist of the following. We'll call roll, public comment, administrative report, minutes of approval of the prior meeting, and action items. A roll call vote will be taken after each item's motion. The liaison will call each member's name to indicate their desired vote, and after that, they may read the final vote. Citizens wishing to speak during public comment time or to speak specifically on an agenda item may fill out a blue request to speak card, which I'm holding a sample of right here for you. And then you can submit that to the right of me, to Carissa. Let's see here. Citizens interested in submitting a written comment on any item may submit a yellow written comments card in person to the staff table prior to beginning a public testimony. When called, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and begin speaking. Groups wishing to speak should elect a spokesperson to represent their views, and you may donate. You'll be limited to 3 minutes. You may donate to your spokesperson 1 minute for a total up to 10 minutes. I remind our audience that the board's review relates to design matters and excludes consideration of existing zoning district designations, entitlements of zoning, or the allowed uses within the zoning districts. The board's motion may be to approve with modified stipulations, sometimes called STIPs, to deny the request, or to continue the case. Thank you for your interest and time. And now, Carissa, may I ask you to call roll?
Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Vice Chair Joyner.
Yeah, here.
Board Member Brand.
Here.
Board Member Pieser.
Here.
Board Member Faki.
Present.
Board Member Mason.
Here.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Here.
All here.
And just administrative note, Commissioner Ali Faki is attending telephonically today. Otherwise, he sits at the end, and so we'll be going to him periodically to make sure that whether or not he has any questions or contributions to the discussion. Do we have any, Carissa, do we have any public comments for non-agendized items? She's shaking her head no. Therefore, we'll move on to the administrative report. Mr. Brad Carr, may we have your administrative report?
Certainly. Councilmember Graham, welcome to you and members of the board. Just want to note real briefly that we will be having our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is February 1st. Plan to have 2 items on that agenda. My colleague to my left, Mr. Bloomberg, will be the liaison for that meeting, as I will be out. But otherwise, we hope to see you all on February 1st for that meeting. I don't believe I have anything else for today's administrative report. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Carr. I hope you're going somewhere. We hope you're going somewhere fun.
Well, I guess it depends on what your idea of fun is.
We got weird ideas.
I'll be traveling to Fargo, North Dakota, so it may be fun for some, but we'll see.
I'm sure at least one of us up here would believe that's fun. So, well, thank you for the administrative report, and then I will ask for one of my colleagues if there's any discussion. Otherwise, we can approve last meeting's minutes. So, are there any discussions or corrections on the meeting minutes from the prior meeting? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion to move to approve the regular meeting and minutes of the January 4th, 2024 Development Review Board meeting as presented.
Very good. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Member Brand. Seconded by Vice Chair Joyner. We will call roll on that item.
Councilmember Graham.
Yes.
Vice Chair Joyner.
Yes.
Board Member Brand.
Yes.
Board Member Peaser,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes.
Minutes approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Carissa. We've got 3 items on our agenda, 1 consent agenda item and 2 regular agenda items. Do we have any recusals, Mr. Carr?
Mr. Chairman, we do. Mr. Faki will need to recuse on item number 4.
Okay. So with that said, we've got 1 item on the consent agenda, and I will ask my colleagues if someone wants to move to approve the consent agenda item or ask questions about it or withdraw it from the consent agenda, and we can move it to the regular agenda. I will open us up for that motion.
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the consent agenda item number 3, item number 31, DR 2023 T-Mobile PH 60907B, Pima and Happy Valley Road traffic light.
There, I think you could just read the rest right there.
Ah.
Per the,
Per the findings that the development applications meet the applicable Development Review Board criteria.
I'll second that.
per the staff recommended stipulations after finding the development application meets the, yep, very good. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Joe, Brad, was that motion satisfactory? Very good. Okay, we'll call roll. Carissa, thank you.
Councilmember Graham,
Yes, please.
Vice Chair Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Brand,
Yes.
Board Member Peaser,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. And with that, we conclude the consent agenda, and now we move to the regular agenda, items 4 and 5. Item number 4 is 15 DR 2023 Scottsdale and Osborne Residential Healthcare Facility. Staff contact Mr. Brian Clough, who has just walked up to the podium to present to us. Applicant contact is Alexandra Gino, and just gave a wave to the board up here. We appreciate that. I think we have a recusal on this item from Board Member Faki, and so we will ask Mr. Faki during this item, since he's not here, we would normally ask him if he was in person to leave the room so that he wouldn't unduly influence members of the board, so we'll just ask him to keep his microphone muted for the duration of this item. So thank you, and with that, Mr. Clough, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and Development Review Board members. My name is Brian Clough with the city's current planning department. I'll be giving you a brief overview, an introduction of the applicant's request regarding Scottsdale and Osborne Residential Health Care Facility, case 15 DR 2023. And specifically, the request this afternoon is for approval of the site plan, landscape plan, and building elevations for a new 6-story healthcare facility with approximately 227 units and beds, and also a ground floor restaurant on the 3.59-acre site. The zoning is downtown multiple use type 2. It's also in the plan block development and the downtown overlay. And this is a context aerial of the site location. You can see it is located on Scottsdale Road in Osborne at that southwest corner within proximity to the Honor Health campus and some multifamily residential development to the south. A closer look at the site. Currently on the site is a vacant building that was the Olive Garden restaurant and surface parking. Obviously, that would be demolished for construction of the new development. See some more of the context with the multifamily residential to the south and north, and some general commercial in the area. As I mentioned before, the existing zoning on the site is in our downtown district with a downtown multiple use type 2 designation, also in our plan block development and the downtown overlay. The plan block development that this site's located in was part of a larger plan block development that included the properties to the south. This here is a look at the
We're just getting excited up here for this.
the
Sorry, Brian.
proposed site plan along with the landscape shown on there. So To the north is Osborne Road. You can see there's an access point into the parking structure from Osborne Road with another entrance to the garage on 71st Street from the west. Most of the parking is within the garage at the surface level, and there's also one more level below grade. The restaurant is located at the corner here at grade, and that's about 9,400 square feet for that restaurant use. The rest of the building is a combination of care units with memory care, minimal care, and also independent living units. I will point out that there is a large open space and pedestrian corridor to the south of the development that was always contemplated as part of the master plan with the plan block development to have that mid-block connection there to provide that connection from North Scottsdale Road to 71st Street for pedestrians. That will be an enhanced open space area with amenities, including enhanced landscaping, hardscaping, benches, and tables for seating areas. There will be new 8-foot wide sidewalks on the other 3 sides, also including shade trees on all the street frontages. Here's a look at the proposed building elevations, being the north on the top and the east elevation on the bottom. So on the right-hand side of the north elevation is the 71st Street frontage there. You'll notice there's a bit more of a sloped step back on there with the building massing. This is adjacent to the downtown boundary on that west elevation, so these building stepbacks are to account for that transition from the downtown area to outside the downtown. Then on the opposite side, you see the Scottsdale Road frontage, and the building heights you can see also kind of step away from that west side. So closer to the west on 71st Street, the heights approach about 55 feet. And then the maximum height is right around 77 feet, and that includes to the top of the mechanical equipment. And these are the other 2 sides of the building, the west and the south elevations. Materials on the building do incorporate multiple types of materials with 3 different types of masonry, also some metal panels and metal accents, as well as different types of color applications of plaster across the building. And a quick look at a building perspective. This is from near the intersection of Scottsdale Road and Osborne. And then a perspective rendering of that pedestrian paseo area that would be providing that connection from Scottsdale Road to 71st Street. So in summary, again, the applicant's request this evening is for approval of the design documents for the proposed residential healthcare facility. And that concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to take any questions for staff, or we can turn it over to the applicant team. Thank you.
Probably hear from the applicant team if they have any remarks to make. Is that okay?
Commissioner, board members, and staff, we're happy to present the Osborne Senior Living Project that staff has already introduced. My name is Stefan Richter with Gensler.
And Doug Sudor, Douglas Sudor Architect and Associates in Scottsdale at 4806 North 78th Place.
Very good. Seth, can you zoom in? Is it possible to zoom in a little bit in the Elmo there?
Got it.
Oh, I think somebody else does it. Okay. Thank you.
We're going to give a very brief overview of the project and highlight a few key elements that had been brought up in the previous hearing. Start off with the site plan. Just to orient everybody, we have Scottsdale Road on the right-hand side, 71st on the left-hand side, and Osborne Road along the north. The 3 main components that had just been previously described was the active adult independent living over on the east side of the property, and we have assisted living and memory care, basically patient care on the west side. One of the key elements on here we want to make light of is the continuous shade canopy that we're providing along Scottsdale Road, Osborne, and 71st Street in that hatch along the perimeter of the structure. Another item, too, is the amenity spaces that are elevated above ground floor. So on levels 2, 3, 5, and 6, we have courtyard spaces, green spaces for the occupants and the patients that are on property and reside in this development. And then, of course, that pedestrian paseo that separates us from our neighbor to the south. It's a public pedestrian way with a large plaza in the middle, lots of opportunities for seating, lighting, and vegetation. One thing to also note, too, just to orient everybody, is the restaurant on the northeast corner. We'll make a highlight about some details to that later on in the presentation, but that kind of sits on the ground level with about 9,400 square feet that Brian had mentioned earlier. Another thing we'd like to make mention of is the materials that have been described have not changed. We have the masonry, we have the simulated wood and metal panel that we're providing along the street frontages of the property, along with the paseo as well, and then a series of warm desert-influenced colors for the palette throughout the rest of the building. So very much in line with what was originally submitted. And then we have several perspectives from different angles so that we can illustrate some of how the materials are applied, and also some of the code or ordinance influenced step backs and shading elements that we have on the property. This is from Osborne on the north side. Looking down on the building, you can see a lot of the continuous shade canopies running along the perimeter of the streetscape. You can see the step backs, some of the balconies, and some of the detail we have with those metal accents that create articulation along the roof lines of each of the floors. And then you can also see kind of the carve-outs where we have those elevated amenity spaces that are facing south, but you can see the cutouts in the building structures, creating articulation, but also providing outdoor open space on site. Quick view from Osborne Road, further down towards the street level. One thing to note here is the streetscape and the street trees. From our original application, we did find a conflict along Osborne Road with a utility line that could not be moved. So some of this had been modified from the original application. We have basically moved some of the street trees and the shade trees inboard. They still provide plenty of shading, and they still provide the required amount of vegetation along the streetscape and avoiding the utility line. Also to notice here too, you'll see the step backs on Scottsdale Road with the building and structure, and the larger amount of space that we have at ground level along the intersection of Scottsdale Road and Osborne. And moving down the building to more of the midpoint of the property, the main entry of the building, where that canopy creates a frame to identify the entry, create a nice gathering shaded area for people to enter and to gather at the ground level, as well as the second floor where we have a lot of the common space amenities for the occupants of the building. One item that we did want to cover too from the previous hearing was great interest about how much space we're providing at the ground level, especially on Scottsdale Road. So we've provided the minimum of 25 feet of streetscape space from the back of curb to the face of building, both on Osborne and Scottsdale Road. And we've increased it at the northeast corner, right at the restaurant area. We've increased it to 60 feet and 31 feet, create a greater spacious area, more comfortable to approach the building and give some of that space back to the intersection. And just to kind of provide a little bit more clarity about that utility conflict, this is a site section just to show the kind of adjacencies and the proximity of where we've moved the shade trees along Osborne Road inboard, still again providing plenty ample shading and protection for the pedestrian pathway along Osborne. They are in semi-submerged, semi-above-grade planters because of other conflicts and so forth, but they are limited to 42 inches tall. So they fit within the ordinance requirements, and they also feel low to feel more like a decorative landscape element as opposed to anything that would be too tall and feel too wall-like. And that completes our presentation. We're opening up to any questions or comments anyone has.
Thank you, Seth. Yes, Vice Chair Joyner.
You said in your presentation you were going to cover the restaurant. Did I miss that?
Cover the restaurant?
Yeah, you said, and I'll cover more about the restaurant in a minute.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
It was more about the corner of the site. So this is at the restaurant entry, a lot of with the tables and chairs and the patio seating, and how we're opening up that corner of the property. Yep.
How many seats and what type of restaurant do you envision?
They do not have any plans. They don't have a tenant identified just yet. It's roughly 9,400 square feet, so there's probably 2 or 3 tenants that are going to go into the space.
Okay. Well, I shall take a look at any of my colleagues want to. Commissioner Kaminsky, please.
I wanted to follow up on the restaurant question as well. For comparison, the existing restaurant that closed, what's the square footage of that?
That's a good question.
Similarly sized.
Is it about 9,000?
It's larger.
About
Is it?
10,000? Okay, so, but you were talking about breaking it into smaller restaurants as opposed to one main tenant?
Yeah, yes, our client isn't devoted to doing 2 or 3. It may be a singular tenant,
Okay.
but we are assuming that it may be 2 or 3 depending on who goes in there.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask some questions about the trees on the north side. You just mentioned that they would be in 42-inch box planter areas, is that right?
Yeah, 42-inch high planters.
Are they-
The minimum required box size for the trees at planting.
Oh, so the tree is 42-inch box?
No, the tree is
No.
in a 42-inch high planter. We wanted to make light of where the max height of the planter itself is 42 inches above grade.
Okay, and are they open to the ground underneath, or are they capped so their roots are kept within the planter?
So they are semi-submerged, so 42 inches above grade, and then we have an additional, I believe it's 1.5 feet of clear soil space below. So they are capped,
They are.
but we are providing 5 feet of soil so that they stay healthy.
Okay, and I noticed they were single trunk, so that's good because they're a thorn species, so you're trying to get them higher. And I love Texas Ebony, but my concern is being on the north side of the site adjacent to a tall building. I'm not sure how they're going to do in the shade condition. I have one in my front yard. I invested in a 54-inch box tree because I wanted a tree. And as soon as other plants around it grew up, they started to thin out and look kind of anemic. So I'm just curious if you could talk to that particular choice of plant on the north side as opposed to having it in an area that's more sunny all the time.
The tree type was selected by the city and kind of dictated the species. We have done shade studies, with the exception of winter, where the sun is a little bit lower. You know, we worked with our landscape architects to determine if these trees would get enough solar exposure during the spring, summer, and fall months. So we feel very comfortable that they're going to do well, especially in those semi-submerged and semi-raised planters. The building does step back significantly on all 3 sides, so we feel that they're going to get plenty of solar exposure.
What is the distance, thank you for that, what is the distance from the trunk of the tree to the canopy or any structure of the building?
It is roughly, let me pull up the plan here real quick. 35 feet. 35 feet.
So 35 feet from any structure,
To the main structure of the building. The shade canopies we have are filtered light. They are not solid.
how close are they to the tree canopy?
They are a little bit closer. The shade canopies extend another 8 feet out from the edge of the structure, so they're going to be closer to about 15 to 20 feet. So they'll be near the edge of the canopy.
And those shade projections are at 15 feet, or what is the height of those canopies on the building?
The canopies are at 15, the bottom of canopy is 15'4".
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah,
Member Brand?
thank you. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. I'll just stay on the subject of the restaurant. Is there patio space that's planned for the restaurant right now? Is that part of the building setback? And if so, I think you have 25 feet on the is it planned on the Scottsdale Road frontage side or the Osborne?
Mostly on the Osborne. We do have seating available on Scottsdale Road at the northeast corner and the southeast corner right next to the Paseo.
Okay. So the plan is just in the recessed portion of that corner of the building to have the patio, or would it occupy the pedestrian walkway? Because it looks like you've got a raised area here. The building's up on a plinth. You've got a couple stairs leading up from a lower area, but most of the pedestrian shade that you're providing is the sidewalk area that's directly adjacent to the building. I'm just curious if that area that's primarily shaded is going to be covered with, used as a private patio versus as a public walkway.
Portions of this elevated patio will be devoted to the restaurant. Sidewalk is down below at the curb line. We do have open pedestrian walkway elevated as well, so the entire space won't be devoted just to the restaurant seating, but we do have space along the entire north edge for chairs and tables.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there will be a portion of the space between the planters and the face of the building that will be accessible to the public to use
Yes.
as a walkway? Okay.
Yes.
And if they need more patio space, it would probably push the face of the building in for exterior patio?
Absolutely.
Okay. That kind of takes me to the next couple questions here, which really focus on the, and thank you, I was going to ask a question about the shade canopy along the north side, the Scottsdale and the Osborne side, but I think you covered it with your presentation. Sorry, the document that we received, sometimes they can get really big, so when we're zooming in on sections, it takes literally like 5 minutes for the PDF to upload, so it's a little difficult to read, but it seems like you're, from what we're looking at with providing really good shaded walkway atmosphere for pedestrians along major frontages, it seems like you guys are doing an excellent job of that, so thank you. With regard to the Paseo, it looks like part of your Paseo improvements are happening on the property of the Carter. Is there what's happening with, is there a joint agreement for improvement of their portion of that property? Because it seems like the property line and the existing conditions of the sidewalk at the Carter and the driveway there are different than what you're showing here. Are you proposing to demo what they have on their building face, and how is that entire relationship working?
So there is a joint development agreement to improve this joint-owned piece of property. However, we are not going to modify their walkway that's, I wouldn't say it's adjacent to the facade of their building, but very close to it, so that retain access to get to the units that are facing the Paseo on that side at the ground level. But we are going to be removing the curb that currently exists there that separates the asphalt on the Olive Garden site and improving up to that walkway that they have to try to blend the two together.
Okay, so how are you doing that in the area that's notated the public plaza? There's at least a third to a half of that public plaza is not on your property. Is there a joint development agreement for the portion that's already built out on the Carter site for you to improve, modify
Yes.
and improve?
There is.
Okay, so you're building up to the northern edge of the sidewalk on the unit-facing thinner portion of the Paseo, and on the public plaza portion, you are removing and reworking per the design that you've proposed in here?
That's correct. Still keeping minimal access so that residents to the south still have access from east to west.
Okay. Considering that there's ground level units on the Carter, is there screening from a parking standpoint? You've got head-end parking spaces that are facing directly into those units that are 20 feet away. Is there shielding from headlight flashing in there? So I couldn't tell from the elevations were.
Yeah, and I unfortunately do not have that elevation, but we do have, basically it's a exposed aggregate masonry wall with areas of openings for ventilation and decorative screening elements with vegetation. So the vast majority of the garage is shielded for headlights to the south of the Carter. One, it was for security because we didn't want people to freely pass through that space and hang out in the parking garage. And two, was also decorative because the entire Paseo is intended to be used by visitors and occupants on either property.
Is the perforation size at least 50% opaque?
It's more than 50%. It's going to be a welded wire fabric that allows vegetation to grow up the side of it.
Okay. Yeah, I think you've got a perspective that shows that. Can you bring that up? I think you had a rendering that shows that. I don't think that there's
I was just going to briefly add, we're also retaining all of the existing mature trees on the Carter along that entire north side.
I know that Paseo, I was particularly concerned about Paseo. It's a fairly narrow Paseo, but mostly concerned because you've got at-grade units, and then on your piece that you're developing, you've got the parking element. So you've got the restaurant on the corner, but after the corner, the next 180 feet is parking use. So just making sure, first of all, it's engaged, and second of all, that it's not a nuisance or creating a poor condition for the residents to the south. Also in reference to that, it looked like, can you talk about where your words on this that says pedestrian path, I think there's an outdoor enclosure in that area. Is that a refuse enclosure that's on the south side and the Paseo there?
Yeah, so basically we do have a masonry divider between the pedestrian path and the refuse enclosure. So it's fully screened and it faces west towards 71st Street. Mm-hmm. So in the Paseo, you won't see or hear anything that's going on in the...
I'm not particularly concerned about the visual connection because I think that the wall helped, but the overhead, the fact that it's an open air, if it's heavy trash or if it has any sort of food and beverage trash in there, that you've got a wind pathway going down a Paseo that could carry poor odors of trash down the Paseo. So I just want to know what your strategy was to address that and what you thought about.
We have a holding area inside the garage in an enclosed room. So all the trash from the restaurant, the wet garbage will go through the garage from the restaurant side to that holding room before then it's taken out.
Okay, so you've got conditioned space that you're
Yes.
doing storage of garbage, and then the pickup is going to occur in the outdoor space?
That's correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure from an operations standpoint that that's something that's, because it could turn foul quickly. Let's see, I think that's all I've got. I thought I heard that someone may have an additional question.
I've got, additional questions from Commissioner Kaminsky, but I'll let anyone else who may, I see none. Member Mason?
I had one question about the white metal C color palette and the brightness of it. I think that has been discussed. I just wondered if you had any further thoughts on why that particular white was selected.
Could you repeat the material?
Metal C.
Metal C, okay. This is the metal accent. It is kind of a warm white, and it is the canopy that runs along the perimeter of the building and then creates that framed entry point, primarily to create contrast to identify the entry.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Good question. Commissioner, please.
If we can have staff pull up the south elevation, I wanted to continue the discussion about what's happening on the south side. What are the plants that are proposed as part of the screening for the garage? I'm a little concerned with what sounds like pretty much a woven wire mesh with what could be vines, and whether or not those are maintained in a way to provide aesthetic coverage. And if they do provide aesthetic coverage, if they're successful at growing, depending on what they are, you may end up running into difficulties with ventilation calculations in the garage, with a change to the permeability of the surface. So if you could show us where the screening,
Sure.
the green screens are, and walk us through a little bit more. And it's hard to see on those elevations, but it looks very muted. You don't have a lot of color interest on these. So if you could walk us through the materials and colors on the south elevation, because it looks a little different than the other sides.
Oh, that's much better. So yes, the color, to respond to the color, it's an exposed aggregate CMU, so it'll have a series of different colors and textures inside. The screen areas are smaller slivers. We have done our mechanical calculations based on a solid wall so that it won't be affected by the plants. But we have worked really hard with our landscape team to make sure that everything we are providing there should survive. The intent is to make this as green as possible. They feel very comfortable with the 30 feet of space between the Carter, which is the property to the south, and this edge of the building, that we should get enough shade during certain times of the year. We are also extending, as you can see up here a little bit, that canopy comes over the top, so during the peak summer times when the sun is mostly overhead, it will get some filtered light.
What are the plants, the vines that you're looking at using?
I don't recall the exact species off the top of my head.
But they would never be replaced with fake plants, correct?
That is not the intent.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. To change gears a little bit, could you tell us a little bit about the memory care component and if you've done anything unique with the design to address sense of place and the ability for them to recognize things within the community?
Okay. Yeah. So, how do I switch back, Brian? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. The memory care area on this side, the west side of the site, some of the things that we have done as far as the program is concerned is we've created this centralized memory care garden. It's a space where, it's a gathering space that's supervised, one from a safety standpoint, but two, also designed so that it feels non-repetitive in the kind of the circular nature of it. We have integrated as much outdoor vegetation and seating areas and a water feature to also enhance the experience. And right off of that, with the internal program that's not shown here, is a lot of the common spaces where we do have the kitchens, the dining areas, and other kind of, I wouldn't say recreational per se, but the kind of common space program that's adjacent to this with lots of natural daylight. So the units themselves kind of revolve around the space, but a lot of the kind of community areas are adjoined to this central outdoor area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions, and I suppose we'll make a motion on this. Can you say a little more about the sewer line and maybe what stage that was brought to your attention that was not movable, or there was, at what point did you know there was a conflict and an adjustment was going to be required?
Absolutely. So we found after our original hearing approvals to move forward.
That's the city council?
City council.
Okay.
We discovered that the 12-inch sewer line that currently exists under the existing sidewalk along Osborne was servicing multiple properties up and down the street. It wouldn't be feasible financially or technically to move it out of the way, and we are not, it's highly ill-advised to put shade trees over the top of that sewer line for clear reasons. So we worked with staff to find a solution that would still provide the trees, the landscaping, and a safe walking area along Osborne. So we felt that this was a very healthy and comfortable compromise, still providing ample shade, and also a decorative element along the edge of the property.
So I guess all that makes sense, but I guess the question is why did you not know about that, like, before the city council? I mean, was it the fact that it was a shared use sewer line? Like, wouldn't you expect it to be shared use?
We're used to utility conflicts and being able to move them where necessary, and I think at this point we didn't know that we weren't able to move this particular line with the volume of the capacity that it was.
Okay, so you had expected to move it?
Yes.
Are there any other sewer lines in this project that you're relocating?
There are no other major trunk lines. I think there was a few utility conflicts that are being abandoned, but there is nothing of this size that we're dealing with on the site.
What's the overhead power lines? Are there any in that area?
No. Everything has been undergrounded on this side of the street.
Oh, good, okay. And then can you go to the site plan view overhead? Can you just sort of show us with like a pen Does the restaurant and the residents and the employees of the assisted living, do they all use the same egress and ingress? Do they all use the same driveways to park their cars?
Got it. Yeah, so we have everybody, it's all shared use, so we have 2 entry points. We do not have any off of Scottsdale Road, so everybody can use the entry off of Osborne and 71st Street.
And those are both entry and exit at both of them?
That is correct. We do have some traffic restrictions on Osborne because of its proximity to the intersection. We have shared visitor and restaurant use on the first level, and then we have 1 level of underground garage, which is dedicated to the people staying in the property.
So you expect probably most people, I guess, the more popular driveway will be the one on Osborne, right? Is that?
To exit, most likely.
Yeah.
Most people from an east of access will probably come off of 71st Street if they're coming in a specific direction. However, we do have access off of Osborne, specifically in the eastbound direction.
Are you concerned about residents parking? I mean, so you said it's shared use, so the customers of the restaurant are going to have to compete with how does that work? How do you make sure that?
We have dedicated parking spaces for the restaurant. We have dedicated spaces for the visitors, which is all kind of open parking because they're not assigned. And then we have security gates for residents in the building down below. So nobody will be able to access those.
How do you make sure that like residents is there guest parking?
There is. It's on level 1. So
Okay.
it's in the open, unsecured area.
How do you make sure that residents, guests don't park in the restaurant parking and vice versa?
They'll be labeled.
Okay.
So they're identified. The restaurant parking is mostly on the east side of the site towards the proximity to the restaurant, and the visitors mostly towards the lobby space and the midpoint of the building.
The Carter on the south, do they have any overflow parking on, I think it's 70, what is that, 70 to the west?
71st Street?
Yeah, 71st Street. Do they have any overflow parking that people park along that street?
For the Carter?
Yeah.
I'm unaware of that. Do you know, Doug?
Councilman Graham and board members, all of the required parking for the Carter is within the private parking structure. However, there is public on-street parking on 71st Street that's open for anyone to park.
What are your anecdotal observations of the use of that, Mr. Clough?
Councilman and board members, it is public and open for anybody, but we have noticed that since the Carter went in, it does tend to fill up. Staff has observed some of the parking in the area over the years.
I just didn't know if, because this project is overparked. It's got abundant parking. Making sure I'm just concerned about just the parking in general in that area. Now you've got 2 really big buildings, plus customers, plus guests, plus employees. What about if employees of the restaurant or the assisted living park on 71st, is that okay?
Councilman and board members, parking, can be tricky when you try to figure out where everyone's going to park. The applicant here has a good plan for providing parking on site and will label those spaces accordingly. But the public parking is open access for anyone to park.
Okay.
And a lot of times, it's a convenience factor where sometimes it's more convenient for someone to park on the street, and that's something that's a challenge that we have to deal with.
We'll keep an eye on it. Yeah, parking is tricky, and that's why we have you, right? So thank you, and I'll take a motion if there's no more questions from Board Member Mason. Do you have anything to add before the motion?
I have one question. I was looking at your plans for electric vehicle charging stations, and you had some that were going to be active and some that were reserved. Do you have sufficient power supply in the building to support those if they're all in use simultaneously?
We do. We made sure we sized everything with our electrical engineers and APS to make sure we had enough transformer capacity and panel space.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll take a motion from a member if anybody wants to put one forward.
Councilman Graham.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 15 DR 2023 Scottsdale and Osborne Residential Healthcare Facilities per the staff recommendation stipulations after finding that the development application meets the Development Review Board criteria and the additional findings for a development in the downtown area.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Board Member Brand. Carissa, please call roll.
Councilmember Graham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Brand,
Yes.
Board Member Peaser,
Yes.
Board Member Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
And just for the record, Board Member Faki, who recused himself, did not vote on that item. So Doug, Seth, thank you for presenting to us today and taking our questions. Brian, thank you for presenting to us and for teaching us a little more about this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You are dismissed. So with that, we just concluded item number 4, I believe, and we will move on to item number 5. We've got Greg Bloomberg, staff contact, who's going to present to us. Applicant contact, Bob Linder. I don't know if he may or may not be here. I would like to invite back to the room virtually Board Member Ali Faki.
I'm here.
Okay, he's here. Very good. So he's back in the room, not unduly influencing anybody. So that's good. So thanks, Greg. Please.
Thank you, Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and board members. Greg Bloomberg with Current Planning here to give you a presentation on Legacy North at Crossroads, 18 DR 2023. The site is located at the northwest corner of what is the Miller Road alignment, also known as 76th Street in Grayhawk. Northwest corner of the Miller Road alignment and Legacy Boulevard in the Crossroads East master plan area. To the north is the Village of Grayhawk condominiums, and the site is surrounded by vacant property. Oh, to the west, there's also a substation and a city well site, but otherwise the properties are owned by state land. Just a closer view of the site. As you can see at the corner or at the intersection of Legacy and Miller, there will be improvements there. There will be a traffic signal installed there for once this project is developed, if this project is developed. And Miller Road will go and connect with 76th Street at Grayhawk. So just a request summary for you before I get into visuals. This is a request for a new multifamily development consisting of 443 units. There will be 335 apartment units and 108 townhomes. The project, as I just mentioned, includes extension of Miller Road to the Grayhawk boundary, which was anticipated as part of the Crossroads East master plan. And one of the unique features of this particular project is there is a publicly accessible pedestrian path and sidewalk along the northern edge of the site that was contemplated as part of the transportation master plan, so that's also being provided. And you'll have to forgive me while I maneuver this mouse. So here's the site plan for the project. The apartment component is along the south half of the site with a central amenity area. The townhomes are along the north side of the property. There's 2 access points. One would be off of Miller, which I think would be primarily for the townhomes. Otherwise, the main entrance would be off of Legacy Boulevard. From a circulation perspective, this is pretty busy, but the dark blue lines represent where all the sidewalks are on site. And then up there at the northern edge of the site, you can see where the path and the sidewalk will be, which again would be publicly accessible and also accessible to the community. This is the open space plan. As I mentioned, there's one central amenity space that is accessible to the townhomes and the apartments, but there's also courtyards spread throughout the property, so the open space is pretty well distributed. Here's some elevations for you to take a look at, primarily stucco, various shades of stucco with some stacked stone elements and some metal elements. Let me see here. Oh, and these buildings are limited to 36 feet by the zoning ordinance, which is R5, so the maximum height for these particular buildings would be 36 feet. This is the elevations for the clubhouse, the amenity area, leasing center. These are some perspectives. You can see that there's good shading around the windows, some protrusions around the windows. There's also some recessing for the windows. The balconies are structurally integrated into the architectural design. And there's some good variation of plane surfaces. So there's reasonable visual interest in the design. That's another pair of elevations. And then these are just some perspectives of the leasing center. That concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here to make an introductory statement and answer any questions you may have, but before they do that, I just wanted to see if you had any questions for me.
Yes, Commissioner Kaminsky.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, when we talk about townhomes, are these owner fee simple lots or townhome style apartments?
These, I'm sorry, Councilmember Graham and Commissioner Kaminsky, they cannot do a fee title lot subdivision in this community because they do not have street frontage for all the lots. So it would just be, if anything, a condo plat.
Okay, so there is an intent for those to be townhome with ownership of some form, not just apartments that look like townhomes?
I would defer to the applicant to answer that one.
The other question I had was about the height restriction and whether or not there's a way of allowing increased height in certain areas if they're providing open space, like a trade-off between open space and height, or is there, the cap is maximum 36?
Councilmember Graham and Commissioner Kaminsky, unfortunately with R5, the maximum is 36 feet. And there's no compensation, so to speak, for open space. The amount of open space is provided. The only thing that's allowed is some protrusions for rooftop appurtenances to go above that 36 feet, but otherwise, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is this NAOS area?
Councilmember Graham, no. This property, the entire Crossroads property is south of the ESLO boundary, so there is no natural area open space requirement.
Very good. Okay, I think we might be ready for the applicant, unless Member Pieser or Brand or anybody has anything else to say. Okay, I'm getting head shakes in the negative, so we will invite the applicant to give us a presentation. I want to recognize Councilmember Littlefield. Hello.
Good afternoon, Design Review Board members, Councilman Graham, and Commissioner Kaminsky and Vice Chair. We greatly appreciate your time and the review of our project located on, let's see, let me make sure I know how to operate this before I really get going.
Can you just state your name?
I will, yes. My name is Jessica Castellato. I am with the Dinnerstein Companies, a development group with several active projects in the Phoenix area. I also want to introduce our design team who will be available for questions. We have Brian Sevi with KTGY. They're a well-known architecture firm that specializes in the housing sector. Steve Carroll with EPT, who is our landscape architect, who's very active in multiple sectors and has done some recent high-profile business with Disney. We'll get more into the detail of our site specifics and why we selected them for this particular project. And we also have the Kimley Horn team, that's Garrett Frame and Steve Haney, who have extensive experience in this North Scottsdale pocket and the existing conditions. I think was Dawn able to make it today? There you are. Dawn is here. She's our traffic consultant who also has extensive experience in the Crossroads master plan area. So, you know, we have a presentation here, mostly resources to answer any questions that you all have as we go through. I am trying to get onto the next slide here. There we go. Greg did a great job of sharing some of the main features of our project. and the site plan. So I might just skip along to some of the renderings so that you can kind of get a sense for the project overall. So just to start, we carefully curated the design and the composition of this project to address the housing needs of this specific area. We think this mix of townhomes and low-rise apartments meets the needs of all the young families and professionals that are gravitating towards this area as a result of all the massive job growth that we've seen, whether that's TSMC, hospital expansions, and corporate headquarters. There certainly seems like there's a need for rental product in this area as folks relocate here and kind of figure out what their permanent residency plans are. To answer your question, Commissioner, the project is all for rent. There is no intention to sell the townhomes. So in this, let's see, I'll move on to the next slide here. There we go. So what made this site really special is its scale. The large open spaces that we have and the outdoor amenities that we're able to provide really put an emphasis on the landscape, which is why we wanted to bring in Steve to tackle this project. We also have primarily focused on, sustainable type of materials, focusing on, native and drought-tolerant plant materials, which Steve can get into more detail if you have any questions with that regard, or in that regard. I'd also like to touch on a couple things before we get to questions. Number one, the proposed project itself completely conforms with the site zoning. We're not asking for any deviations or waivers of the objective design standards. And from the start, I'm going to go back to the site plan. Sorry, there we go. From the start of this project, we specifically oriented the townhomes on the northern portion of the site to be adjacent to the Greyhawk condominium. So we have the lowest density kind of product on the site to create a better transition from condos to these 3-story townhomes to the more dense apartment type of product. We also were very intentional in that we stepped the buildings down from 3-story to 2-story along that northern edge to further respect that condominium product that's existing there, as well as providing an enhanced setback. So we're providing 25 feet when the minimum requirement, which includes a landscape buffer, is 10. So we really wanted to be thoughtful and sensitive in that regard to our existing neighbors. Overall, we thoughtfully designed the project, really tried to be purposeful within the context. The project architecture is a desert modern theme, which I know Greg did a great job of showing you all some of the building elevations. Again, here's kind of the leasing office rendering, and I think this next image shows you a really great perspective with the McDowell Mountains in the background. You can see, we're using earth tones that are neutral and kind of, intentionally blending with the natural surroundings. And we wanted to maximize the views of the mountains, not only for our residents, but for the surrounding area. In addition to that, just as a footnote, we're a very green organization. On all of our projects nationally, we pursue green strategies. This project's no exception, so we'll be pursuing a LEED certification. So in any event, it's really been a pleasure to work with Greg, and we've appreciated the collaboration and his input as we've come to this final design to share with you all. And now we're here respectfully asking for your support to move forward. So with that, if it makes sense, maybe the design professionals could join me up here, and we're happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Thank you, Jessica. I will look for questions from my colleagues. I think I see one to my left, Board Member Peaser.
Could you bring your site plan back up again, please?
Sure. Let me see if I can figure it out. Sorry. There we go. One more. There we go.
That's good. I'm not exactly sure if this is a question for you or Greg. This might be a question for you. But when I look at this site, we have a main entry off of Legacy on the south end of the site and a main entrance off of Miller on the north end of the site. So if someone came in on the north end, they'd have a long, long ways to go if they happen to live on the south end, and vice versa. And that's just for people who live there, they know which entrance they want to come in. What concerns me more than anything else is if there's anywhere along Legacy Boulevard or anywhere along Miller Road that's been designated for emergency vehicles to come in and out, because if they get there and have to go through that entire site trying to find, if they come in on the north and have to go to the south or vice versa, usually when you get on a site this large, there are areas of the site that look like they're complete, but the emergency vehicles can come through, whether it's landscaping or a locked gate or something. And I'm just curious if any of that was thought about when this whole thing was, because this is a large site.
Greg, do you want to take a swing at it?
Councilmember Graham and Board Member Pieser, what I can tell you is that the fire department was part of the review team, and a fire plans, circulation plan was provided to show where the fire lanes are all located, and they've signed off on that plan. So as far as I know, public safety is not a concern for the site.
So the fire department is okay with the fact that they only have 2 entries to this entire site as far apart as they are, and so you're saying they're okay?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
In addition to that, we did get staff's early input on this matter. Originally, we actually had these 2 pieces more bifurcated, and staff recommended that we connect the 2 so that there is a full path of circulation between.
Well, I know I've been involved in large site like this, and that was the first thing that crossed my mind.
Yep.
Because in all the years I've worked in construction, you typically don't see I'm looking over there on the south side by Miller Road, and that looks like, well, maybe that's designated as an emergency entry. There wouldn't be anything on the west side because it's a vacant lot, and on the north side, I think, is the Villages at Greyhawk. So the only 2 places you'd have, and I was looking specifically at that area on the side at Miller Road, thinking, boy, that'd be a great place to put an emergency entry. But if the fire department's okay with it, then I'm not here to question their wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Pieser. I think I've got Member Mason, please.
I have a few questions. Looking at the design of the site, particularly the common areas around the pool, are you planning to provide shading, particular shaded areas that would be applicable during the summertime, the peak sun hours, when people might be out and want to use it? And it looks like it's just fairly wide open, which would discourage use during those periods of time. Are you planning to do anything like that?
Bear with us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Stephen Carroll with EPT Design. We're the landscape architect on the project. Yes, we've done lots of solar studies of the amenity spaces, including the pool area. We do have some overhead shade structures as well as tree canopy, so there's lots of shade provided in that space.
Okay. Another question related to planning is, I'm concerned about how you've set it up for children and play areas. Would you highlight where those play areas for children would be?
Yeah, I'll take this one too. So at the north end of the project, so the project, as others have noted, it is a large site. So for ease of wayfinding, and as a landscape architect, sort of how we configure the site is there's a north-south spine, there's an east-west spine. To the north of this north-south spine is a play space. It's not a dedicated playground per se, but it provides play amenity for kids as well as some outdoor dining and seating.
Okay, very good. I have 2 more questions. Both of those related to your EV planning. I see that you had, same question you had before, you have a number of sites dedicated to EV now. Some are sites reserved for EV. And then I don't know what the situation is in your garages. I don't know what your plans are for EV charging stations in the garage. And the second corollary to that is, what is your assumption for what percentage of your charging stations would be in use simultaneously, and have you provided sufficient power?
I don't think, I'm Brian Sevey with KTGY Group Architects. It was kind of small. It's not in the PowerPoint. I assume you're referring to the exhibit that shows color-coded in green and blue where we have the electric vehicle. Yeah.
EV ready and EV planned?
Yeah. Sorry, Brian. Yeah.
My main question was on capacity.
So to answer the question, yes, we have been sizing our electrical rooms and transformers to meet the demand for those electrical vehicle chargers, assuming that they would all be in use at the same time, as they all would be parked in overnight and charged at the same time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Mason. Vice Chair Joyner?
You saw me moving, I guess.
Yeah, I saw a twitch.
I have a question about parking, so it might, or about traffic. Maybe it should be addressed to the lady that's in charge of traffic. If I'm understanding correctly, Legacy is going to be completed to Miller with a light or a roundabout? A light, okay.
Don Cartier with Subtech, 10605 North Hayden Road, Scottsdale, Arizona. That is correct. As part of this project, the signal warrant is met with the future volumes once we start to extend Miller. So that would be a part of what I believe has been stipulated.
And that will be completed prior to the completion of the construction?
I believe that's your stipulation, yeah. So it would
Okay.
have to be done prior to, I believe, opening. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And maybe this isn't a question for you, but what's the plan for Legacy to go all the way to Pima?
That's probably a staff question.
Yeah, staff.
Councilmember Graham and Vice Chair Joyner, that's a really good question. I would have to defer to our Transportation Department, and I don't believe anybody from
That's all right.
Transportation is present.
It's just with all the traffic, I mean, I just can't wait for all this traffic to dump onto Scottsdale Road, since everybody on Pima is now having to use Scottsdale Road. So I'm very excited about this. Anyway, that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Board Member Brand?
Yes. I do have a couple comments. I'll start with a couple comments just on things that I like about the plan, and then I've got a few questions on the layout and the building design real quick. I do appreciate the separation and creating what looks like really three distinctly different product types on site that both from a scale, look, and organization sort of break up the feeling of the site, but also create tiered and different types of housing all sort of amenitized on one area. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness, and a lot of times we see kind of a singular concept for residential just massively spread across the site, and I do like that there's up and down and different typologies that really give different areas of the site. So kudos to the development team as well as the design team. A couple questions on it looks like there's an east-west pedestrian connection that's offset from Legacy Boulevard, not the major east-west spine, but the one south of the amenity building at the north side, kind of the entry. You can see it on this plan. It's south of what is probably your leasing building. The blue line.
Can you just point it out for the members of the public?
That one right there. It looks like you've got not official on this map, but you are promoting pedestrian crossing at the main entry point there, because you've got accented paving and you've got the sidewalk that branches over and crosses across. I would be requesting that you do connect that east-west down to access to Legacy Boulevard. Right now, you're not showing any of those blue lines that cross across that drive aisle. And we certainly don't want it crossing at the middle of the entry drive coming across, but probably in alignment with the sidewalks on the east and west of your leasing building, Probably not there. I would route it over to the edges. I don't think you want it crossing there because you got a lot of heavy traffic, but if you
Yeah,
make
on the
that
sides.
in continuation of what's coming, there you go. That's probably where we would suggest, or I would suggest, it's a continuation of your path from the northernmost side of the project to get down to access frontage on Legacy Boulevard.
That's really good. That's good.
So that was one from an access standpoint, one thing that I noticed. The other thing from a building design, it looks like the clubhouse, can the architect kind of explain what the approach was from an elevation standpoint? The clubhouse, I particularly like the design of the clubhouse in the leasing center, or the leasing center in the amenity areas, with kind of a vertical wood offset with heavy glazing, steel, metal, and a light eaves product, it looks like. It is distinctly different than your approach to the apartments, and it looks like the for rent product has multiple approaches to. What was the basis of? Was that intentional, not intentional? What were you thinking there?
Yeah, it is intentional. As you mentioned, there are a blend of typologies in this community. So you have townhome buildings, 2- and 3-story, and 3-story apartments, and then these amenity buildings, the courtyard buildings. For some of those buildings, we've really tried to emphasize vertical massing, and then accent that with strong horizontal lines. That's primarily the shading elements. The townhomes are a little different. We've structured those more vertically, try to emphasize the massing more so on a vertical basis, less horizontal. And that's just a function of the typology, and the massing is different, and we want to address that typology a little different and emphasize the fact that they are townhomes, and play up the individual entries and accentuate the reduced massing. The leasing building's a different animal altogether in its massing, and so we're really trying to play up those horizontal lines, and again, kind of contrast that and break that up with some of those vertical elements with material changes. The strong horizontal line is created with a lot of the shading elements that are incorporated in those deep overhangs that allow us to do that big, large area of glass with a lot of transparency, but yet we have the deep awning that comes out so that we can completely shade that glass area.
Yeah, I was gonna note that I really like what you guys have, the approach to the leasing center, and I didn't see any of the repetition of the vertical wood siding material onto any of the apartments, so I was.
No, we're doing some stone elements that kind of create some vertical lines there on the apartment buildings. But we do want this leasing center to be a little distinct and create an identity. It is the heart and the hub of the community. So it does match in a lot of elements, and the coloring does not completely contrast with the rest of the project, but we do want it to have its own identity in the center a little bit.
Second question really goes to, thank you for the explanation. The composition of the remainder of the elevations, there are small moments of stone, of stacked stone that happens. From how we're used to seeing projects, I was wondering about how that was chosen, the composition, because first of all, I would personally prefer to see a little bit more stone, and it seems like it's sporadic enough that it doesn't particularly have enough of it that it feels at home. It feels like it's located on maybe some circulation cores that maybe happen sporadically on a building, maybe at one moment or another in a kind of a small, thin vertical application. And we're used to seeing stone and more resilient materials like stone at a little bit more of a base condition, or located or creating enough of a foundation of that elevated material type to be to create, I guess, compositional dialogue across the entire building instead of a small encapsulated in-between space on the elevation. So I didn't know what the approach was for the stone.
Yeah, our approach with the stone materials to emphasize those vertical fins, like you said. Yeah, and on the apartment buildings, there's our townhome building. I know it's a little dark with the lighting, but we're using horizontal lap siding material on that building that we are locating primarily at the base level to help define that ground level on that building. But on that building, we're not using masonry to emphasize the entries, but we do have massing that indicates the individual entries on the,
It seemed like on that piece, you had the pieces that had the siding that came down to grade and had more siding on them did not have the stone articulation on them. Is that correct?
that's right, the townhome buildings do not have the stone, but the apartment buildings do.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with, I think that the material palette that you have for the townhomes with the siding elements, I think has enough texture and variety to it. I think these buildings that have kind of the sliver of stone on the one side is where I would ask it. Just, it's the right material for the palette of the buildings. I think it's very complementary, but it seems like you've got a building that wraps all the way around. You have one spot right in the middle of one elevation that's stone, and it not only feels a little bit awkward because there's not enough of it. It's just like this strip in the middle of the building. But if you were going to have stone here, I think it works with the palette, but I would almost prefer that went to the vertical piece went to something like on the back side of the building where the garage is, you're not using it. And it looks fine, but I would almost prefer that the stone was used a little bit more widespread, or maybe created a base condition on that middle portion of the building to be to have a little bit more presence.
Yeah, I think we'd be open to that suggestion if we, rather than focus on that singular vertical element, if that stone was redistributed more at a base level where it's at a pedestrian scale, where people can touch it and feel it, where it's
I just
in a
think
tactile zone.
If you have it, your material page looks great. If you have it, it needs to be present enough. It's a highlight material, and it's probably the material that has the most texture and probably relevancy to the mountain ranges and the materials in the desert around here. But it needs to have more volume on the building facade in general to really act, to do what it should be doing.
Understood.
So I appreciate the palette, but I'm probably going to make a motion here, but would want you to turn it over to approve it and to work with staff to expand and possibly incorporate into a base condition some of the stone elements on this. So is that something that would be amenable to?
We'd be happy to work on that, yeah. Yeah, there's some patio wall elements on this building that right now are shown with metal railing, which matches the railing design of the second and third floor balconies, and we'd love to explore maybe putting stone on those elements instead to find that base.
I think just visually to tie a few more elements around the building into something it's an upgraded material. So I appreciate it.
Was that throughout the whole campus, Commissioner or board member, or was that just for particular buildings?
That was for it looks like the 3-story garage units, like this.
Okay, is that?
It's on the buildings. I believe these are the buildings that are on the south portion of the site, correct?
Do you want to point to them?
Well, yeah.
Yes, it would be for these buildings in the southern portion of the site. These 3 buildings are the courtyard buildings, and these other buildings are the apartment buildings. They have that stone element on right about there in the middle. So we'd be
okay.
And those are also
revising
buildings that are facing in that orientation,
Facing Legacy
the
Boulevard.
public frontage. Yeah.
Okay, I think I've got some questions from Commissioner Kaminsky, please.
I have one question for staff and then probably 6 for you guys, so I'll start with staff. On the aerial, there was reference to a street to the south of Legacy, and I think it was Claret. I'm just curious how the naming of this will work when you have, is it 71st Street to the north, and then we have Miller, and then one of the aerials that looked like had a different street name, so I was curious how this would be named.
Where's Claret?
Councilmember Graham and Commissioner Kaminsky, I noticed that when I put my presentation up, and that is not Claret. That is actually 76th Street.
Okay.
And I do have a question into transportation to see if there is any plan for there to be a consistency in terms of whether it's Miller all the way through Greyhawk or 76 all the way through Greyhawk. I haven't ascertained that yet, but it's not Claret.
Okay, my preference would be whatever is, for one continuous rather than breaking it up with a section of Miller and then 76 to the north, so.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's a good question.
I Wondered if you had any street views from Legacy or from Miller, or views from what it would look like to the residents to the north of the townhomes? Not aerial, but from the view of a pedestrian level?
We're really going to test everybody's eyesight here with this exhibit. This is from our DRB submittal package. The lower elevation, and the buildings are obscured by landscaping a little bit. That is intentional. That does reflect the true design and planting. But the lower elevation is the Legacy edge, the building edge there, and then this upper elevation is the building edge on Miller, as seen from the street.
Okay, thank you. And the purple trees, are those desert willow, or those ironwood? What is?
Do you want the Latin name or the?
I can answer to either. I'm just curious if they were accurate to what's shown on the rendering, if that's actually what's on the palette.
We have a lot of Palo Verde across the front. There's a lot of existing blue Palo Verde on the site that we're going to reuse.
So the purple image, this is not ironwood or desert willow?
I think that might be artist license, sorry. That might be artist license on the pink tree that you see.
Okay.
Yes.
It could be jacaranda trees.
Well, that's why I wanted to know if they were accurate to, it sounds like they're just
No
poetic
jacaranda.
license.
It's a native desert palette of trees that we're using on the site.
Okay, thank you. Could you elaborate a little more on the play amenity area? What exactly are the amenities available for families? And is there any open real turf areas? Are there pet play areas?
Sure. Yeah, so the dedicated play space sits to the north, at the very north end. It's a combination of outdoor seating and dining, along with what we would define as adventure play. So no dedicated play structure, but elements for climbing and just to kind of play in an active sort of way. To the
Like
east of that,
I'm sorry, is it like actual infrastructure, like climbable equipment, like rock walls and stuff, or?
yeah, we have like mounding forms and some rock forms that they could climb on. So it's intended to be a play space, but it's also intended to be, nice visually to look at when it's not being used in that capacity.
Okay.
And then to the north, to continue with your question, to the northeast corner, we have a dedicated dog area.
Good. So is there any open turf area with real grass?
And then south, yeah, right here. South of that dedicated play space is an open turf area. So it's sort of that north spine transitions from play or active play, and then sort of informal play in that lawn area. And then as you continue further south, you get to the pool area, the
And
pool
it
deck.
is real turf?
It is synthetic turf.
Okay.
It's hot.
All right.
And just to add on to that, these areas were intentionally planned within the townhome kind of concentration of the project, because we're obviously, we're expecting our demographic will be young families and Steve, I think
That's why I was hoping to actually have some investment in some product for youth.
Yeah, so, it's really interesting. Across our portfolio, we have put in a lot of these kind of tot lot playground type of facilities. And what we found is they actually don't get used that much to the extent that you kind of think they would. And where we really see the most use, or the most, I guess, requested, is just pure open space. Because what tends to happen on these apartment projects is you squeeze in these little tot lots, and it's just this tiny area where, kids maybe not older than 3 can really stretch their legs and run. And again, the thing that makes this site different is that this is a big site. We have 20 acres. And so it's really interesting perspective just to look at this. I mean, I'll tell you, this is our little dog park area, and I say little, but this is probably the biggest dog park I've ever planned before. And just because of the scale of the site, it looks small.
What is the square footage of it?
No, shoot, no. Now you're really putting us on the spot, but.
It's close to, I want to say it's 800.
It's about 800 square feet. So it's, this alone, this little tiny. Yeah, so this is 800 square feet. So imagine, and I think you guys have the calculations on what all this open space is, and we could certainly follow up if there are any questions in that regard. But this is a really large open space area that's meant to be more integrative, so that it's not only kids that benefit from it, it's also visually appealing to the residents. So like what Steve described, you'll see more like natural materials that are used that.
Yeah, if I could, sorry, Jessica, to cut you off, but just build on that. Sitting out here for like 30 minutes before we came into this presentation, this is a great example, the play space that you have out here. If you watch the kids, I observed probably a dozen kids playing outside. Most of them were climbing up that sort of bermed space that has the black sort of modules on it, and coming down the slide or actually climbing back down. None of them were playing on like a play component per se. So a lot of the work that we're doing, we do a lot of park work with like the Trust for Public Lands, a big national organization, and a lot of it's transitioning away from a play structure that's deemed as prescribed play, and allowing the kids to, this notion of adventure play is really starting to take hold. So I think it's a good combination of, as Jessica was just pointing out, visually it's probably more attractive, but we'll have enough play element in there for the kids.
I am concerned about the artificial turf.
Yeah, the heat.
It's just too hot.
Do you want to talk about the coverage on that area? I know we've talked about it in our design.
Yeah, we've talked about that. We do have a cooling system, irrigation for that, and then like I've said, we've done our studies, solar studies for the site, 3D modeled it, and are making sure we have enough tree coverage in there for shade.
Okay, thank you. I also had some concerns about the use of materials, particularly, as viewed from the street, but also around the garages. I asked staff if there had been discussion about the utilization of more durable materials, the idea of wrapping garages with stucco on either side, especially for a rental product. There's more likely chance of that being dinged by people driving into their garages. Would you consider doing four-sided architecture with a masonry base that grounds all of those buildings with a masonry product, not necessarily stacked stone? It could be honed masonry or split face, some other material other than EFS.
I think one item that I'll point out just as part of the discussion is the buildings are not right up against those roads. We do have a 3 to 5 foot apron that sets the garages back. So people have driveway space and room to back up in the road itself, but then there's an additional 3 to 5 feet to the building itself. So the garages and the stucco wall of the building would be set back, and we are using those landscape pockets to buffer and protect the building. We haven't seen issues with people actually hitting the building because the buildings themselves are 30 plus feet apart.
I do think they would look better if the garages, that lower elevation was masonry rather than stucco.
And just to piggyback on Brian's statement and respond to you, Commissioner, in our experience, we haven't had a ton of, I'll call it maintenance-related issues or residents running into pillars between garages. So we have considered that kind of a non-factor, and we're open to using enhanced materials to Mr. Brand's comment along the apartment building in some select spots. But we do feel like we get the most out of those on the areas where we're expecting there'll be more pedestrian interaction and more visibility to the public. For example, on the frontage along Legacy, I think we'd feel much more like that is making an impact on the whole resident experience and community rather than placing additional materials on kind of the, I'm going to call them like the back side of the buildings where the garages are located. So I think we will push back a little bit on that piece.
Thank you. Do you, don't by any chance, know the percentage of each elevation that's stucco versus other materials, do you?
Well, excluding the glazing, the masonry and the fiber cement siding material is about 15%.
1.5?
15, yeah, 15%.
And was there any consideration given to a pitched roof building design that would consider more of the character of the area?
So is that a question about the style itself relative?
Yeah, a pitched roof as opposed to flat roof, yes.
Yeah, we do have a 36-foot height limit, and a pitched roof building will actually be taller than that because the ridge will extend up higher. But the main reason that we're doing the flat roof building is it's part of that desert modern aesthetic that we've selected. We think that's appropriate for this building typology. Certainly, there are multiple architectural styles that are influential in Scottsdale, and there's territorial and Tuscan, Italian, Spanish styles that you'll see in other areas. But for our project, we're doing a desert modern architecture, so the pitched roof we didn't feel was appropriate. So the flat roof has other benefits from a design standpoint beyond just aesthetics and what we think is appropriate for this site and our theme. It does allow us to put our mechanical equipment on the roof so that we don't have ground floor mechanical area. We put the mechanical equipment on the roof and screen it so it's out of the way and you don't see it, frees up space for landscaping. And it also maximizes our building roof area for solar, since we are committed to include photovoltaics.
I'll ask Board Member Faki, who's joined us telephonically, if he has any questions or comments.
I have actually a couple of things. I want to echo some of the board member compliment on the layout here. I really like the circulation. I think the applicant did a really good job. I know it's a big site, but at the same time, they were able to circulate really well. Overall, I agree with board member Brand earlier on the comment on the architecture piece for the material, but I like the circulation, I like the site plan. I'm supportive of this project for sure.
Thank you, Board Member. I'll jump in a couple questions I have. If I have an electric vehicle and I live here, can I only charge that if I have a garage? Because I assume you pay more for a garage, or you get one garage unit. How does that work?
We'll pop the visual back up onto the projector screen so we can show you how they're planned. They are primarily located in garages. However, we do have a public charging station adjacent to the leasing office, as you can see here. However, the way that we typically manage these projects when it comes to EV is you are assigned a garage based on your vehicle type. If you have a vehicle type that is EV, you are prioritized in getting an EV garage. Several of the garages in particularly the U-shaped buildings are attached, and so we've prioritized the EV charging garages to be detached, if that's the right term they're not detached from the building, but they're not connected to a unit, so that it provides more flexibility to make sure that we're maximizing the availability and the use of the EV. Like we talked about, we're as a firm very committed to green, and we believe that the trend going forward will be more and more electric vehicles. And we believe they will be used. And it's also a revenue collector for us, so we want to make sure those are planned as efficiently as possible.
Okay, and then just to go back to what Commissioner Kaminsky said about the turf, is there anywhere that you're going to have grass, or is it just going to be all sections of turf, artificial turf, like the dog park and spaces like that?
Just those two areas.
Okay, what was the other one? The dog park and which, and the, maybe do the,
Dog park area here.
Yep.
And then this turf area here.
okay. That's all artificial.
There's no turf in this open space area here.
What's the temperature difference between the artificial turf that you've selected and like a grass area?
It definitely absorbs heat, which is
Correct.
why we typically would put a cooling system with that turf grass, with the synthetics.
Are you going to put a cooling system in this one? For,
Yes.
in both the dog park
Yes.
and that open area? Okay. And then I have a couple questions for staff members. Does this, if I'm on Legacy and I'm westbound, does this have a right-hand turn bay to get into the right-hand turn bay to get into the apartment?
Councilmember Graham and board members, there will be a deceleration lane for westbound traffic going into that site.
Okay, good. And what kind of appurtenances for if you're eastbound turning left? Is there going to be one of those raised medians or pork chops?
I don't recall looking at the site plan.
Are we talking about the left-hand turn, a left-hand turn like from?
For traffic heading east on Legacy.
We wanted one, but I think that it did not work, or it was not congruent with the transportation master plan for the area. But we would like one, if you would like to stipulate it.
Well, stipulations are for you.
Can we request one? Is that, sorry.
What can we do about, can we do anything about that?
I think.
Uh-oh. We got the attorney wants to speak. Uh-oh.
Transportation and transportation engineering and the experts in transportation are the ones that really kind of make that determination. It can't, and they've taken a look at it, and because of their concerns, they've obviously not recommended that or denied that, and so it can't really be something that this board could.
Right. Stipulations are for the applicant.
Right. And
So you're saying the transportation experts said no.
Right.
And you're saying trust the experts.
more than you think, because you don't know how streets are designed for safety. They sort of do. They take a look at all kinds of criteria to make their recommendations.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Fair enough.
Always keeping us in line, keeping us within our purview. Appreciate that. I wanted to ask about the, this is also for staff. Can we zoom in or get a better view of the trail on the northern edge of the property? I just want to understand, first of all, is that paved or gravel?
Councilmember Graham and board members, there's actually going to be, if my recollection is correct, there's going to be two different paths there. There's going to be a multi-use path that would not be paved, and then a paved sidewalk.
So one paved and unpaved?
Correct.
Do you know about how wide those are going to be for each?
I don't recall.
Can we see?
The multi-use path is 8 foot paved, and the trail is 6 feet.
What I wanted to ask about is, I wanted to see the connectivity to the east and to the west of the property. Like, you know, if they don't go anywhere, they're not very, I mean, where do they go?
Councilmember Graham and board members, this was a request, this is part of the transportation master plan, and this is a request from transportation that they incorporate this into their project design. And I believe it's eventually going to connect with one Scottsdale to the west, but it's not going to happen until somebody develops on that particular property.
Okay.
So it is intended to be a connection from Miller further west, possibly eventually to Scottsdale Road.
So it's going to terminate on the west side of the property?
For now.
But what about the connection on the east side? Does that connect to Miller or?
It connects to Miller, correct.
About that? Okay, Commissioner Kaminsky has a question about that subject matter.
There's a north-south connection there.
I'm not familiar with the transportation master plan details. I'm just curious, if we have a multimodal path which would serve multiple modes, why we're expending within the 25-foot space with two separate paths next to each other, as opposed to more landscaping to make it a more enjoyable experience on the multimodal path, like one path with more landscape?
Councilmember Graham and Commissioner Kaminsky, that's a question that I would have to pose to the Transportation Department. They made that a requirement of this project to include those paths, and yeah.
Do we have any, we don't have anybody from transportation here. Can we phone?
I do not believe we do.
Can we phone a friend, or how do we do that?
We can try.
Board Member Brand, did you want to add something about that? What do you remember, Jessica, in your conversations? Did they say that was a requirement, or, because we would, more landscaping, it seems like we have an unpaved path that to go to nowhere, so.
So our understanding, per feedback from staff, including Greg and the transportation team, is that we're one of the first in this section to tie into a regional kind of master plan. And so we're happy to accommodate, per transportation's guidance, the master plan specifics in terms of the design. However, if you all have we do not have an opinion on whether it's one or two paths and would be open to more landscaping in this area if that were important too.
Is that going to be an open access? Is that going to be a public trail and path? There's not going to be a gate that's going to be blocking people, right?
It's a public path as part of the regional trail master plan.
Can we add like a stipulation to work with staff if there is no requirement to add more landscaping and to consolidate to one trail or path?
Councilmember Graham, board members, certainly, you could make a stipulation that the applicant coordinate with staff to try and integrate additional ground cover or trees where feasible, something to that effect.
Or should we continue this until we have a transportation department member here, and we're moving away and we're not guessing?
That would be entirely up to you. Yeah.
Board Member Brand, if you made a motion.
No, but I can.
No, I was just saying if you made a motion. And
I did not.
No, I said if you made a motion. And you were going to talk about, connecting that middle sidewalk that you talked about earlier, the stonework with the stonework on the three-story south side units. I liked Commissioner Kaminsky's comments about masonry over stucco for the garages. I know that at least aspiring to that. And if, there aren't any prohibitions for, reduction from trails and paths from 1 to 2 and have more landscaping on the north side of the connection, that's part of the open. Do you think you could somehow articulate a motion like that?
I can take a stab at it. Yeah, I can certainly do that. Was there any other?
Is there any more commentary? Okay, I guess before that, I got Board Member Mason over here.
I have one more comment going back to the play areas. Where you are planning play areas, are you providing adequate shading so that it will be usable, like the one out here, which has plenty of shading? Are you providing similar shading?
Yes, yeah, we have a shade structure over the play space.
Okay, great. The second question was on your dog park areas. Since there are going to be turf, are you going to have facilities to wash and clean them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a motion?
Yeah, Commissioner Kaminsky reminded me though. Krista, do we have any public comment? Request for public comment? Okay, any written public comment? I thought we did get an email recently, but I might want to, I think we just, if I could just read that into the record. This is from Karen Harrelson. Please make sure there is a solid wall on the north side of the new development at Legacy and Miller. This will keep the car lights that will be traveling north to their garages and the townhomes from shining into the windows of the villages at Greyhawk. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, but is there anything to say about, is there a wall on the north side? Is there any threat of car lights, headlights going into the villages at Greyhawk to the north, shining into the...
Our townhome driveways terminate facing north toward the Greyhawk condominiums. Steve can talk about what that edge condition looks like now.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
we can discuss.
We have landscape to buffer that, express the same concern, not only northbound for Greyhawk, but also south as well for the residents of this community. But there's no wall to the north edge.
There's currently an existing wrought iron fence between the Greyhawk condominiums and the vacant site now. And we are willing to work with the ownership there, the HOA of the Greyhawk Condominium Association, if they would like that wall replaced. However, because that occurs on a property line, we don't necessarily have the right to make changes to it ourselves.
And we don't have the right up here to enforce or enjoin you to do something with another party.
So we are, yeah.
Is that correct, Joe?
You are correct.
See, sometimes I get things, sometimes.
However,
Very correct.
we could stipulate that they have a screen wall at the end of each of their driveways that was like a 4-foot or a seat wall that had maybe a seating element to serve the path, but also blocked lights at the ends of those driveways.
Okay.
I think we can put together an elegant
What was that called, a screening wall?
Like a seat wall that would serve dual purpose, where it might have a higher back that's like a 3 to 4 foot tall to screen the lights, but then it would also have a seat section that's about 18 to 20 inches tall facing the path. So you'd have something blocking the headlights and then something that you could sit on.
Yeah,
adjacent to
I
the
think we could definitely accommodate that.
Okay.
Is there any elevation difference between villages and your property? I would imagine if there is one, yours is lower. But I don't.
Garrett Frame with Kimley Horn. So the natural desert is high at the north and it goes south, so our buildings are stacked that way as well. So those buildings, I haven't looked at their finished floor elevations, but we are cascading down, and I expect our finished floors are lower than theirs.
But the cascading is gradual.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Well, I will invite our colleague, board member Brand, to attempt a motion which would include at least 4 stipulations.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to move to approve case 18-DR-2023 per the staff recommended stipulations, as well as board guided stipulations to look at the additional spread of the stacked stone material on the apartment buildings to cover some additional base conditions and work with staff to look at explore more resilient options for materials surrounding garage entries on the garage face, to modify the pedestrian connection pathway to the offset to the perimeter sides of the entry drive connecting down to Legacy Boulevard, and to integrate a seat wall and partial screen wall into the end caps of the driveways on the north side of the property with the trail. After finding that the development application meets the Development Review Board criteria.
Did you get the stonework on the 3-story units in the south? Okay.
I did.
Okay. We have a motion, and the Vice Chair Joyner put forward a second to the motion put forward by Commissioner Brand. So I will ask Carissa to call the roll.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Joyner?
Yes.
Board Member Brand?
Yes.
Board Member Pieser?
Yes.
Board Member Fickey?
Yes.
Board Member Mason?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky?
No.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you.
Well, very good. Thank you. I want to thank the applicant's team. I got the names written here somewhere. Jessica, Brian, Steve, Garrett, Don. There's 2 Steves actually on your team.
That's right. Thank you very much.
And as well as our own Greg Bloomberg. So I want to thank everybody for being here in attendance, for your time, listening, and participation. I want to thank those streaming, watching online remotely. I want to thank city staff, Brad, Joe, Greg, as well as the AV staff, Caitlin and Jason, and Carissa and Jack. Thank you for your help. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved. We have a motion, a second by Board Member Mason. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.